Well, we did have to eventually get to a class that I think is a bit on the weaker side, and that class is unfortunately Tactician. Not to say it's bad and you cannot find success, as finding that success is the reason for this guide, but it feels noticeably weaker than the other classes covered so far. It's not because it's a healer or anything, since healers are actually a lot more useful in this game. It's more so most of the gimmicks and unique aspects of the class just don't work nearly as well later in the game or in post-game. In this video, I do want to discuss the Tactician class, talk about its strengths and weaknesses, and showcase how to use it most effectively. This guide should not have any story spoilers in it, but there will be some weapons from classes later in the game or from side quests, so be careful. And as always, if you enjoy my guides and want to see more class guides and more guides for Xenoblade 3 in general, make sure to subscribe to the channel because it does help out so much. Let's get into it. Tactician is one of the 6 default classes, and as such the best character for the class is going to be Taion, who will get a large stat boost compared to anyone else in the class after you upgrade his weapon with a side quest later in the game. Tactician is a bit of an interesting class with its identity, so I want to discuss skills before arts in this guide. The first skill it has is Ethereal Ability, which boosts damage of ether arts by 50%. Now, this is one of the only damage boosts that a healer has as a skill in this game, off the top of my head, so it's interesting that Tactician has it, and it may lead you to believe it's supposed to be a bit of an offensive healer, doing ether damage while functioning in the role. Honestly, this is not a bad skill, and as a master skill it's nice for a lot of ether-based damage classes, but it is a bit bizarre on Tactician, who I feel doesn't have the greatest damage and probably doesn't want to run a lot of damaging arts. Shield Render will make every attack you do be completely unblockable. Honestly, this is a pretty nice skill because never having to worry about enemy block rate is a very nice thing to have, but once again it feels strange to have on this class. Since this is a ranged ether class, you don't have to worry about blocks making your attacks clank and lose time. You can always keep attacking regardless if anything gets blocked, and once again this seems like a skill that would be better for attacker classes and not a healer. Eternal Curse is where I think a lot of the identity of this class comes in. This extends debuff duration by 50%. What it seems like this class wants to do is be a bit of a debuff stacker on enemies, which that's all well and fine, but a lot of the late game unique monsters, story bosses, and especially super bosses have pretty high debuff resistance. It is very difficult to apply debuffs effectively to many of these enemies, and you will often find that debuffs end up feeling very underwhelming more often than not, and this only gets further outlined the harder you try to just make it work. The final skill is Inevitable Evitability. This just grants a flat 10% chance to evade attacks. Once again, I'm left wondering why this class has a random 10% evasion skill when you don't really ever want aggro to begin with, and even then, a flat 10% skill is very rarely likely to save you in most situations. It feels like a lot of these skill slots don't really contribute to the identity of the class, although Tyon's Ouroboros also gets a lot of bonuses with debuffs, and can set debuffs itself, so maybe it's supposed to just work in tandem with that. The primary master skill for this set is Sappy Drain, which may as well be required if you want this to work at all. This will increase the success rate of debuffs by 25 percentage points. If you want to go all in on this debuff stacking setup, then you really need this skill, otherwise you probably are never going to be able to effectively debuff anything later in the game. These types of abilities may work better in the early and mid game, but even then it often feels underwhelming. The other 2 skills I am running are Eternal Formation to increase field effect duration by 50%, and All About Support so I can equip another field effect because I feel like as a healer you want to offer some level of party support, and one of the best aspects of this class is its Evasion Up field effect, which is very nice when combined with agility tanks. Now this also means that you can't personally run any of the party support skills like Swift Song or Essence of Ether that are really nice and useful to have, so you may need to run these on another healer or even a tank if needed. There doesn't really feel like a lot of better skill options for the class. For arts, we have Overfall. This is a very fast cooldown art that can inflict the ether defense down debuff and has a decent power multiplier of 375%. If you want to have damage with this class, this is pretty much going to be your main art. It recharges quickly, can apply a debuff, and will increase all ether damage further if it actually manages to work. This is a good art to run at all times. Stormy Skies is your healing art. It's the only standard healing art that you have, so if you want to be a healer at all, this also feels basically required. Especially since you need arts like this for your talent art as well, since you want to perform role actions. It's a pretty low cooldown for a heal at the very least of only 4, so it can be pretty spammable. Hazy Figure is another art with a cooldown of 3, and will place an evasion upfield in an area which is nice for agility tanks, and even for the rest of the party to dodge more attacks and remain safe, and it also charges the talent gauge. This is a solid art that I feel like is worth running in most situations. Avenging Eagle is another very fast art with a cooldown of 3, so there's no shortage of speed on this class. It has a decent damage ratio of 310%, and will inflict the evasion down debuff. You could run this with Overfall if you wanted for 2 debuffs, and yet in some ways it feels like running both of them could be a hindrance since you'd lose your good field effect entirely. And honestly, these are essentially your only 2 debuffs because Dark Banner may as well be useless. Sleep is garbage in this game, the art does no damage, has the longest cooldown of any of his arts, and all around never feels worth using since it's impossible to actually take advantage of a sleeping enemy with 7 people hitting it at the same time. I guess if you're fighting 2 or more enemies, you can put some to sleep and have your party focus on just one of them, but even then, there feels like better options. Inflicting Ether Defense down and Evasion down are nice, but you'd think this class would be all in on being a hardcore debuff stacker instead of not having much at all. Furthermore, because of its access to healing only being a single art, I'm running Multi-Blast just to give another source of healing on a standard art as one of my master arts. Of the healing classes, 6 of the 8 are Agnes-based, so healing master art options are extremely limited for Agnes healers. And Medic Gunner's 2 options don't really help with healing, and the final art is just advanced cooldown. A good field effect at the very least for raising defense that I am also choosing to run, just to be a somewhat good party support member. Once again, this also helps with talent art cooldown as well. The final art I am running is Tyrant Cross, which applies a random debuff when it hits, but only on a long 24-second cooldown, and it can also easily be resisted. Regardless, if you really want to be a debuff stacker, I feel like this is an art that you'd really want to use. I'm honestly not sure what arts you'd want to run over these. Maybe Demolition, since it's the strongest Ether Master art you have, and you do get extra Ether damage with the class, but other than that, it's difficult to see any better art options than these 3 personally. The standard talent art for this kit is Tidal Wave. This is just an art that will restore health to allies upon hit equal to 150% of your healing stat. It has a 700% damage multiplier as well on the hit and has no other effects. Even this talent art is a terrible option though, because Soulfire is literally the same thing, the exact same talent art, except it can apply an attack down debuff. The talent art for this kit is straight up outclassed by the talent art of a different class, and that different class even applies a debuff, which is what Tactician wants to do. I just do not understand. But regardless, you should probably run Soulfire if you can, or at least choose a different talent art with a debuff. Gem setup is going all in with trying to make debuffs as useful as possible, increasing both the power and duration of debuffs further to at least make them as useful as possible. If you're running this class over another healer, it would be for the debuffs, so you may as well run these gems. My final gem is just life-saving expertise for faster revives in case my allies die. Fairly standard for a healer and something I really like a lot in this game. For accessories, I am using the Solus Rings just to boost my healing stat as much as possible so I can keep my team healthy throughout fights. Ceramic Belt as an attack boost, since it feels like this class wants to be more offensive with ether damage, so I figured I'd try to spec a little bit into offense, though there are definitely some other good supportive options as well. And finally, Devotional Necklace, probably my favorite accessory to use on a healer to ensure you get all arts back as soon as you revive a character, meaning you can heal them instantly and set up support fields and effects. Extremely useful to regain momentum in battles, and an extremely good accessory in general. You could also consider running Brute Memory for your own safety, and even Crystal Earrings if you want to build up chain attack gauge faster. And with all that done, let's take a look at how to use this class practically, or at least try to. So starting out, I do want to quickly show just how difficult of a time you're going to have applying debuffs to some of these super bosses, some of the harder enemies in the game. Like, every time I use a debuff here, I try to use Overfall. When I try to use Tyrant Cross, it just doesn't work. I even have the 25 percentage points lowering for debuff resistance, and it's still not working very well. Like, the Tyrant Cross debuffs I try to apply don't work. Overfall never works. It's just kind of ridiculous that it just resists it this much. And it makes it feel like not very useful as a class. And what about if you have something that can lower resistance of enemies, like Terror Onslaught on a different class? That gets resisted too. The Resistance Down art gets resisted. Why does the Resistance Down art get resisted? The entire point of a Resistance Down art is to make your other debuffs be able to hit, so if that can get resisted, what is the point of the art at all? That should work 100% of the time, otherwise it's just another useless debuff for no reason. Anyway, with that done, I'm going to try to showcase try to effectively use this. Since it's not going to work on these super bosses, I'm going to go ahead and fight the next best thing, this level 96 unique monster, because sometimes the debuffs work on them. Overfall doesn't initially, but we're going to try a little bit later here. Generally, how I like to start fights is set up my fields pretty quickly, get Hazy Figure out, everyone's standing in it. I think that's pretty useful to do. And then advanced cooldown will be up, another Hazy Figure will be up, and I'll be able to apply those effects to my party as well, which is really nice to have. No debuffs have applied yet, unfortunately, but I'm going to have Tyrant Cross soon, so surely something will happen when I use that. And that actually does apply attack down, so we actually finally get a debuff. And then Overfall actually applies its ether defense down, so we're actually finally getting some debuffs here. We've got 2 so far, that's really nice. Soulfire can't actually apply attack down because attack down is actually already applied. That was the randomly chosen debuff from Tyrant Cross, so we couldn't get 3 debuffs here, unfortunately. And Right now, since there's not really anything else I can do, I don't have anything else I can apply until Tyrant Cross is back up. But Tyrant Cross gets resisted, we will never know what that debuff was going to be. I use Overfall again, that gets resisted. I think you can reapply it if it doesn't get resisted, but I was not that lucky, unfortunately. I use Soulfire to try to get the attack down again, but that gets resisted. Why wouldn't it? Sorry, I'm complaining about resistance a lot. Overall, though, this class still has a couple good things going for it. It has Hazy Figure, like I said, the evasion field's nice, the advanced cooldown field defense up is nice to go along with it just to keep your team's survivability in check. Soulfire is pretty good as a healing art that you can charge up fast with the other roll actions you can do with Stormy Skies, all the field effects. Multi-Blast is a pretty good healing art that helps everything. And debuffs actually apply a lot easier to normal enemies. I just got 3 almost instantly right there before this enemy dies. 4 now. So when you're fighting normal enemies, this setup can work really well. But when you're fighting unique monsters, it doesn't seem to work as well, in my experience at the very least. Even with the chance that gives you 25% extra chance to apply debuffs, it doesn't seem to work very well. Like, super bosses especially, this has a really hard time applying the debuffs to. But even regular unique monsters seem to have this issue as well, which is kind of annoying. So, in that sense, I think probably the most effective way to play this class is to try to keep your evasion fields up on everyone. At least you are contributing something positive at all times when you do that. And occasionally the debuffs can work sometimes, and it can be nice to have that attack down. It can be nice to get the ether defense down going, especially if you're running ether-based attackers in your party, like Soul Hackers or Full Metal Jaguars. Those will get a lot of benefit out of that. So, there is some benefits to a lot of the debuffs that they can actually apply. The problem is just applying them. And Overfall is not necessarily a bad damaging art. This class does have really low cooldowns. Stormy Skies 4, Overfall, and Hazy Figure are both 3. So you can actually cancel arts pretty quickly, which can be nice to charge up your other art, your Agnes arts faster. Again, if you want to reuse them, I can charge up your Talon art really quickly, so that can be nice. And if your allies ever get too far away from you and you want to have them in the field effect, you can easily call them back to you as well. And you can also activate Ouroboros forms with Taion. If you actually have a debuff on the enemy, Taion's Ouroboros form will freeze debuffs on enemies, so that is actually one positive benefit if you can actually manage to get debuffs with the Tactician class. You will freeze all debuffs that are currently on an enemy. And I think the class was supposed to work in tandem with it. I think that's probably the point of stacking the debuffs in general. And Taion's Ouroboros has an easier time applying debuffs for some reason. And of course I somehow completely missed the Talon art with the Ouroboros, because why wouldn't I? That's a little unfortunate. Once that expires, I can go back into trying to use my ground debuffs, maybe reapplying Ether Defense down, maybe applying Attack down. We actually get an attack down there with a Soulfire. So it works a lot better than it does on a lot of other enemies, but at the same time, you wish it worked better. Now, if I wanted to run a Resistance down art, it would probably work better on an enemy like this, and if you can actually get that Resistance down, you could actually apply debuffs a lot more efficiently for as long as that debuff lasted. There are 2 classes in the game that have access to Resistance down, as far as I know, Machine Assassin and Soul Hacker as one of their arts. So if you can apply Resistance down, that can be pretty useful as far as making this class work better. And it also kind of synergizes with Machine Assassin in general, since that class gets a bunch of extra damage depending on how many debuffs are on an enemy, and can also apply debuffs itself. So if you really want to take advantage of this class, you should probably synergize it with or team it up with a Machine Assassin, or maybe even 2 Machine Assassins. Just try to take as much advantage of that as possible. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the chain attack here, because there's not really much else to show outside of that. I just want to quickly show kind of Taion's special and chain attacks, the kind of the damage you can do as well. I believe I start off with him with other arts in the first round, though, and use him in the next round. I do apply Power Charge to everyone with Noah's art there, so we can have Power Charge ready to go. I'm running Valdi for the purpose of preventing spoilers, otherwise I'd probably be running Ashura just for the easier and stronger chain attacks. It's a lot more difficult to get strong chain attacks with my current setup right now. It's not really built for that, so it'll be a little sketchy as far as getting to the final round, but I do manage to do it, thankfully. Uni's bonus completion here will reduce Ether defense by 50 points, so it'll also increase the damage of Taion next round. We'll only have 75% more damage on the attack, but hopefully that'll be enough to kind of do something at least. Don't want to use Taion special yet, because that would instantly bring up the Ouroboros order, and I don't want to have that happen just yet. So you can see right there, that was like okay damage, but it wasn't really that spectacular. And I think that's one of the reasons it's a little bizarre that a lot of the skills on this class are offensive, because you're just going to get way more offense just investing more into your attack-based classes. See, Noah just did more damage in like 2 hits than Taion did at all, and he did way more hits than just 2 hits. So here's Taion's finisher, if you get to that round in a chain attack. You can see even here, it's not doing that much damage. At this class, if it's supposed to be offensive, I wish they were going to give it more damage as far as, like, making it kind of a hybrid class. Maybe also giving it more damage depending on debuffs for the enemy, like Taion's Ouroboros form would have been nice. We don't have any debuffs on the enemy right now because, of course, the Overfall got resisted when I used that. It gets resisted right here. But at the same time, we do have buffs on ourselves, so that is one positive, because if we have buffs, we can at least get the bonus from Uni's Ouroboros and finish off the enemy. All in all, though, I think the main benefit of this class is probably the evasion field. It actually works really well, especially with the Zephyr class. Other than that, I think it struggles a lot compared to a lot of other healers in the game. The debuff stuff just doesn't work as effectively as you'd like, especially later in the game. It probably works better early on in the game when enemies don't have as much resistance. But the class really gets outclassed later in the game, and I feel like there are a lot better healer options overall. But you can still use this class and probably have plenty of success, so it's not that bad. But it definitely feels like a class that struggles more than most classes, especially at this point in the game. I do think that is going to cover it for this guide. I don't really know what else to say about the class. You can use it and have plenty of success if you want to. It can be a lot of fun if you can actually manage to stack debuffs. It actually does work pretty well on normal enemies and probably elite monsters, but the problem is most of these strong, important enemies are not going to be those. But if you just want to have fun against those types of enemies, this setup can work just fine, and you can stack a bunch of debuffs and have a lot of fun with that. But regardless, I hope you guys learned something from watching this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. And if you did not, because I was way overly negative, I hope you look forward to some of the other guides where I will not be as negative. Look forward to a class tier list pretty soon as well. Look forward to Heavy Guard tomorrow. I have a lot of things to say about that class too. And yeah, just look forward to all my guides, and if you enjoy these guides, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below, and support me any other way you want to. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful and blessed day.